Case of the ox, right? It's an extra fine that's put on the person. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi says that we see in the Torah that there's 4 associated with sheep. Therefore, when it comes to the cutting the wool, shearing the wool, if it's 4 sheep, that's enough to require that you have to give to the Kohen. Tanya was taught in a brayso. Amar Rebbe. Rebbe says, "Ilmalei divrayim divrei Torah." If only their words were words of Torah. Divrei beribi Kabbalah, and the words of Rabbi Yossi came from Tanakh, rather Nach, the Nevi'im and Ksuvim, Anan divrei beribi Shem, we would still follow Rabbi Yossi. For Kolshkein shedivreim divrei Kabbalah v'divrei beribi divrei Torah. Now, Kal v'chaimer, that what they said is from Nach, and what Rabbi Yossi said was from the Torah. So let me explain. Beishamai quoted a pasuk in Yeshaya that says Shtei Tzayin, 2 sheep. Beis Hillel quoted a pasuk in Shmuel that says Chamish Tzayin Asuyas. It's both from the prophets. Rabbi Yossi quotes a pasuk from Shemais, which is in the Torah. Comes along Rebbe and says we have to follow Rabbi Yossi, even if it would have been the opposite. Even if Rabbi Yossi would have quoted a pasuk from Tanakh, from the Nevi'im, and Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel would have quoted a pasuk from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moshe, of Moses. So we would have followed Rabbi Yossi anyway, because Rabbi Yossi is so great. Now, for sure, that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai quoted a pasuk from the Nevi'im, and Rabbi Yossi quotes a pasuk from the Torah. For sure, we follow Rabbi Yossi. Okay, the Gemara asks, "V'amar Ma'ar, how could he say this? Ein achra shlishim achras." See, sometimes when I have a machlekes and I don't know who to follow, so I can take a third opinion that accepts one piece of this and one piece of that, and I say that, look, the third opinion, the how would I say the third? It's not like the mediator, like the one that he accepts a certain aspect of this opinion, and he accepts a certain aspect of that opinion. So then what I do is, when I look at each one, I say, look, in that aspect, it's 2 against 1, because the third one agrees with him. And in this aspect, it's 2 against 1, he agrees. So sometimes I can say that there's achra shlishis. I can say that the third opinion is machriya, and he creates a majority in each aspect. However, if he's not doing that, if he's just picking something, so for example here, he said 5, he says 2, comes along Rabbi Yossi and says 4, he's not accepting any opinion. He's not accepting the 5 or the 2. So why should we follow Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yochanan says, Mipi Shmua Amra, Mipi Chagez Chayim Malachi. The reason why Rebbe says halachas like Rabbi Yossi is because he has a tradition for this, Mipi Shmua, from the last of the prophets, Chagez Chayim Malachi, that say that it's 4 sheep. I don't think that's the halacha, which is interesting after all of this. The halacha is that it's 5, right? Isn't that odd? That we should have so much elaboration on the greatness of Rabbi Yossi's opinion.
He's trying to make him feel good.
Well, Rabbi Yossi wasn't around. He even heard it from Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi could have been around, but he didn't. He wasn't. Rebbe was in the days of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi.
Could you just summarize this final thing with the 4 against 5?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you can have. Rashi gives a few examples for this. This is a discussion. Rashi's example is that there's a discussion about a certain cloth that's used. It's used as like a pot holder. Now, usually a cloth needs to be a certain size to become tamei. this cloth, because it's being used, it could be that it's tamei. It's tummy already. So it's machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer holds that it's automatically tummy whether this cloth was set designated or whether it wasn't designated for that use, or it's automatically tummy. Rabbi Yeshua says it's tar, whether it's designated or not designated. Comes along Rabbi Akiva and says when it's designated for use as a potholder, then it's tummy. When it's not designated, then it's tar because it's not the right size. So we say that Rabbi Akiva is the middle opinion. Why? Because when it comes to a designated a cloth that's designated, him and Rabbi Eliezer agree that a designated cloth is tamei, and he argues with Rabbi Yeshua. When it comes to a cloth that's not designated for use as a potholder, him and Rabbi Yeshua are 2 against 1. Rabbi Eliezer holds that it is tamei, but Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua hold that the cloth that's not designated is not tamei, so it's 2 against 1. So Rabbi Akiva can side up with one side in each of these scenarios, and that's considered a third opinion that mediates between the two, and we would follow this third opinion. However, if I have 2 opinions that don't have anything in common, and the third one doesn't have anything in common with either of them, so I don't just say, oh, the third opinion is the third way mediates. I don't say that. So here I have Beis Shammai says 2, Beis Hillel says 5, comes along Rabbi Yossi and says 4. I don't say that Rabbi Yossi is like, just because he has a middle number, it doesn't mean that he agrees with anyone. He's not agreeing with anyone. So I don't accept Rabbi Yossi's opinion in such a case. It's just another opinion. So Rabbi Yochanan comes along and says, no, the reason why Rabbi was accepting Rabbi Yossi's opinion is because he has a tradition for it. And it's not the fact that it's a third opinion, it's because of a tradition that's causing this to be accepted. Okay, we had a discussion in the Mishnah, how much wool do you need to be obligated to give the gifts to the Kohen? Right? We said you have to earn a certain amount of money to have to pay taxes. So how much wool do you have to get to be required to give the gifts to the Kohen? Rab Daisa ben Horkenes, he said, how much wool do you need? You need 5 sheep, that each one is a mana and a pras, a mana and a half. How much is a mana? A mana is 100 dinar, 100 zuz, which is 25 selah. And the Chachamim say 5 sheep with the smallest amount. They don't explain.
They have a difference between Yerushalayim and to the Galim. How much the seller is, no?
That we're going to discuss soon. That is discussed on how much you give.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about how much you have to be required to give. Okay.
But we're going to put it in the corner for a few minutes. It's causing an issue here.
I was in the bank, and the bank manager said, someone was yelling about something. The bank manager said, quiet, and the guy yells back. It's an old guy, yells back, what is this, a schoolroom?
That's amazing.
Okay, so what we're discussing here is the sages say kolshu, the smallest amount. I went off?
No, just
The kama kolshem. How much is the smallest amount? The sages say, even if you shore, how do you say to shear in if you sheared. Shorn sounds like the tear, right?
Shorn, S-H-O-R-N, the corn.
So shorn, even if you sheared or had shorn, 5 sheep that only gave you the smallest amount of
how
wool.
much sheep could the shear to?
Now you have coffee. See, now you have life.
So you're still obligated. But the Gemara asks, how much is the smallest amount? The Chacham said the smallest amount. Kol shein means like the smallest amount. How much is the smallest amount? So Amar Rav says mano pras. It's a mana and a mana and a half. Mana is 100 coins, 100 dinar, which is 25 coins, and pras is a half. Chamash is as long as you could divide it into 5. That means each one has 1/5 of that. So the way it works is like this. Rashi spells this out. 25 sela is what we're talking about. 25 sela plus a half is 37 and a half, right? If you divide that into 5, so each one will be 7 and a half. 7 and a half sela from each sheep. You see, let me just explain. In the olden days, the way they used weights, the way they used measurements was they used coins. The coins were the measurement, and the weight of the coin. So they had one. They didn't have. I guess in England, what was a pound? A pound was a pound.
You know the different ones.
No, I'm talking about the. I know they use the metric system, but their coin is a pound. Like a dollar. But what was a pound? Was a pound the weight? So, in the olden days, a sela was a coin, but the sela was also a weight. So when they weighed the wool, it needed to be a 7 and a half sela weight from each sheep.
But the question, how you make sure the sela is the right amount measurement?
Yes, so they had set coins, like you mentioned. They had one sela in Yehuda. They had another sela in Gul. So here, this is talking about the sela of Yehuda. Now, the 25 sela is a mana. A mana and a half is 37 and a half sela. You add a half to the 25. Half of a mana is another 12 and a half. So Rav says that how much wool off the 5 sheep would require you to give to the Kohen? It's 37 and a half, which is 7 and a half per each. So how is this arguing on Reb Daisa? Because Reb Daisa also said a mana and a half. The answer is that Reb Daisa said a mana and a half for each one, for each sheep. They say no, kol shehein. The Chum say no, the smallest amount. That means even a mana and a half from all 5. Follow? Okay.
A pound is a pound of silver.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Original.
Wow.
I mean, for our weight system, or is it a pound?
A pound in the
English pound?
English pound.
That was a pound of silver.
Then my weight is, I'm very rich in my weight, my body weight.
So, but we do it. It's so interesting because an ounce is $1, right? And a pound is how many ounces is it? 16 ounces. So this is a huge difference between a pound and $1. Now it's a pound. It's like $1, $2 or something. So that doesn't add up very well.
How much
Follow?
is an ounce of gold worth?
I don't know.
Over $1,000.
Yeah, but an ounce of silver is $1, right? A dollar coin was, I think, if you get a silver dollar, it was 1 ounce, or 0.96 or something. What does it say on it?
It says in England.
No, how much
I'm just
is
saying
an
it's
ounce
funny
of
that
silver
it's
worth?
such a huge difference between the pound. When today that's the same, almost the same.
There it says a pound is equal to 240 silver pennies, which is 1 pound of silver.
How many grams are in an ounce?
Interesting.
How many grams are in an ounce? 28 to 30.
Thank
28.
you, Dr.
Shot
Google.
glass.
So 28 times 49, 50 cents. 50 cents a gram of silver.
Wow.
Oh yeah, go tell that to Moshe.
Okay,
I
so
just bought my son with silver. I know what I'm talking about.
Shmuel says shishim. Shmuel says you need 60 sela. 60 sela. So Shmuel sort of doubles it because Rav only said that you need 37 and a half. It's a little less than double. Shmuel says that you need shishim. V'naisin selachas l'kayim. Shmuel adds in this point, which is going to be contested shortly. He says that you give 1 sela of the wool to the Kohen, which we didn't say in the Mishnah. The Mishnah sounded like we said 5. Rabba bar bar Chana Rabbi Yechanan. Rabba bar bar Chana says the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Sheish. Even 6 sela, very small amount. And l'kayan chamish, you give 5 to the kayan. Ve'echad layin, he keeps 1. Now, obviously, if you have more wool, then you'll keep more. But 5 are the gift to the kayan. That makes sense. Ula Amar Rabbi Lazar. Ula says the name of Rabbi Lazar. Kol shein sheninu. We said the smallest amount. Why are you telling me a bunch of measurements here? It's just any amount. Tanan, it was taught in the Mishnah V'kamin Noisin Lai. How much do you give? This is Rabbi, and this is what you mentioned. How much do you give to the kain? We were talking about here how much you have to get in order to be obligated to give. So we gave 4 opinions. You have to get 37.5, 60, 6, or the smallest amount. Now we say, how much do you give to the Kohen? We quote from the Mishnah. Mishkal chamish shlam b'Yehuda she'nes shlam b'Gold. 5 coins in Yehuda, which is 10 coins in gold, different size coins. Bishlam l'Rav, l'Rabbi Yechanan nicha. According to Rav and to Rabbi Yechanan, this could make sense. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yechanan, he says clearly you give 5. According to Rav, we said how much you have to get, which is 37.5, and you give 5 of them to the Kohen. We didn't say how much you're going to give. Like the Mishnah says 5. El Shmuel or Rabbi Lazar Kasha. According to Shmuel and Rabbi Lazar, we have a problem because according to Shmuel, he says you only give 1 to the Kohen, and according to Rabbi Lazar, he says that you have the smallest amount. You have to give to the. How do you give 5 if you didn't even get 5? So Ulataimech, the Gemara asks, L'Rav minicha. You think it's so good according to Rav? You said that it works out well according to Rav. But Rav and Shmuel Damar Tevai Reish Sagez B'Shishim. Rav and Shmuel both said that Reish Sagez is with 60. What it means here is that you give 1/60th. According to Rav, if you need 37.5 to be obligated, and you have to give 1/60th, so you're going to give about a half in a drop, a half of a selah. So the Mishnah doesn't fit with Rav either, because Rav tells us how much do you give 1/60th, and if the total that you have is only 37, so 1/60th of 37 is a half, and the Mishnah says you have to give 5. The Gemara says, "Yitmar Allah the Hayid Rav Shmuel Damar Tevaya B'Yisrael sheyesh legizin harbe askinen u'avakish litin lekayin." It was stated on that case of Rav and Shmuel that they said that the Mishnah is talking about a person that has a person that has a lot of wool, and he wants to give to a bunch of kayanim. You see, you can spread it so thin that each kayan will get even less than 5. But we're advising him, don't do that. So give the kayan something substantial that he should be able to do something with this.
Let him be happy. Let him bless you. Give him a lot so he'll be happy and bless you good.
Right. This is like a question like Mois give for Pesach. So you can give to all the poor people, and each one will get $1. Or you can give each one something substantial, but you can't give to everyone. But so over here by the Kayan, it says that you give to them something, at least the minimal substantial amount. That you should give at least 5. But it's not saying that you have to give 5. It's saying when you have so much and you're dividing it up to give to a bunch of Kayanim, you should allot that each one should get 5. Okay, Gufa. It's taught before that Rav and Shmuel Damar Tevaya Reish against B'Shishim. Rav and Shmuel both say that the first of the wool is given 1 out of 60. Truma is B'Shishim. Truma as well is 1 out of 60. Peya, the corner of the field, is also 1 out of 60. Okay, we're going to have some questions on this. Truma B'Shishim. Truma is, even though we gave 3 things that have 1 out of 60. We put them all in one category. Truma is 1 out of 60. We said someone that's generous and is giving Truma, it's 1 out of 40. Which is more. It's not 1 out of 60. 1 out of 60 is less. It says Dairaisa B'Shishim. Mid-Dairaisa, you only have to give 1 out of 60. When it comes to the Truma, the first of the grain that you give to the Kohen. But the Rabbanan Barbam, the rabbis say that you should give a little extra, you should give 1 out of 40. The Gemara says, Deraisa B'Shishim, it's 1 out of 60. V'amar Shmuel Chita Achas B'Ter Sasakri. Min HaTorah, it's 1 out of 60. Shmuel says that even that one grain exempts the whole silo. You don't have to give 1 out of 60. The Gemara says, Deiraisa Kiddushmuel. Really, Midairaisa, just one piece of grain will exempt the whole silo. But the Rabbanim B'Deiraisa, the rabbis, made a measurement. If it's biblically obligated in Truma, they said, Achas Merbarim, they said you should give 1 out of 40. The Rabbanim B'Derabbanan, if it's only rabbinically obligated in Truma, the rabbis gave a measurement for that is Peshishin. If you want to be more generous, then you give 1 out of 40 in that. But if it's a biblical obligation, the rabbis gave a measurement 1 out of 40. Okay, so we answered that up. Peya B'Shishim. Peya is 1 out of 60. The Gemara says, V'atanane, L'dvarim shein lem shira, Peya v'abikorim v'arayin. We have a Mishnah, we say it every day, that these are the things that have no measurement. One of them is Peya. Why are you saying that the Peya has to be 1 out of 60? Any amount is good enough. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Ein lem shir. It means there's no measurement. Whatever you give is good enough. And bikurim is also whatever you give is good enough. And ra'ayin is riyah, the oilas riyah. You can pay for it. When you go to the temple, you can buy a sacrifice. Whatever price it is good enough.
Is that minimum or maximum share?
I
always thought it meant maximum.
So Rashi over here says, I'm sorry. First of all, Taisus has a question that why don't we say Truma also doesn't have a measurement? Because Shmuel says even 1 grain will exempt the whole silo. So that means there's no measurement. So Taisus answers, I'm quoting the Yerushalmi, that Truma does have a measurement because you can't make all your grain Truma. So it means there is a maximum measurement. So I guess it's referring to both minimum and maximum.
Did you
According
tell
to
us
that
Truma
answer.
was Trey Meya,
Right.
3%?
Right. That's the average. Here we said that a generous person gives, if it's a rabbinic Truma, a generous person gives 1 out of 40, and a stingy person gives 1 out of 60, and the average is 1 out of 50. So it sounds like Ein Lam Shir means that there's no minimum and no maximum. So the Gemara answers, the Raisa Ein La Shir, Mina Torah, there is no measurement for Peya, but the Rabbanan it's B'Shishim. Rabbinically, the measurement is 1 out of 60. Micah Mashmal and Tanina, what are you coming to tell me? We have a bright, it's a Mishnah that says this. Ein Peichsin Lepeya Mishishim, that you don't give less when you have to leave the corner of the field. The corner of the field should be 1 out of 60. The Gemara answers, Af Bishamara Peya Ein La Shir, even though we said that the Peya, there's no measurement, Hasam Ba'aretz. That's in the land of Israel. But Hacha B'chutz La'aretz. But here we're dealing with outside the land of Israel. How do they explain now what this means?
It says the Rambam says that according to the Gemara, the mitzvah pay applies outside of Eretz Yisrael with the Rabbanan.
So over there it's 1 out of 60. I guess this is the Chiddush, that in the land of Israel, you're not supposed to give less than 60. He's coming along, Rav and Shmuel are coming along and saying that even outside the land of Israel, it's also supposed to be 1 in 60. This is a little surprising because usually we don't say that Peya applies outside the land of Israel. Maybe it's only those places that are close to the land of Israel that have the law of Peya, like the other things. Okay, Kisalak Isi Barhini. When Isi Barhini went up to the land of Israel, Ashkeche Rabbi Yochanan found him, the Kamasni Le'lebrei, that Isi Barhini was teaching his son. He says, Rechelim. He says, how much sheep do you give? Do you have to give the gifts to the Kohen when you shear the wool? So he was teaching, instead of saying Rechelos, he was saying Rechelim.
Rechalim is the better quality of Semer, no?
Why do you say that?
Yeah, but we read something in the place. I don't remember what it
We said that the female sheep is
Yes.
better.
No, Rechelim is female, no.
And Rechelois is what?
Rechelim he said here he's doing mistaken, but Rechelim himself is Rechelim
Okay.
Rechilot is
Okay.
a female.
Okay. So he says Rechelim, which is
It seems like a male.
which is the plural, a masculine plural on Rechelim, which is sheep. He says it's a female sheep. Amalei, it's not a Rechelis. He says you have to say it with a feminine
Feminine, yeah.
plural. Rechelis. Amalei Kedeksiv, he says back, Rechelim Masayim. I quotes the pasuk when Yaakov was giving gifts to Esav. It says that word Rechelim, the plural, the masculine plural on the sheep. So Amalei lashon Torah latzman, lashon chacham latzman. There's biblical Hebrew and there's Mishnaic Hebrew, and the biblical Hebrew is different than
So
the.
למעשה זה נקבות. Everyone you saying זכר, זה נקבה.
Okay.
Yep.
What the pasuk saying?
It's just saying that Rechelim is a multiple of a lot of Rechelis. It's like a flock. It's just a lashon, but not necessarily changing feminine to masculine. That's how I'm understanding.
That's what I'm saying.
That's why I looked at it and said, yep,
Yeah.
I think.
That's what I
what
heard
he's
you
saying
say.
is right.
Thank you, Dan.
No.
No, we got 2 votes for Aaron. I mean, he's the Cohen.
But yeah, we're working on that.
Aaron Cohen?
Is it? There are exceptions to the rule of putting on a masculine suffix onto a feminine word. There are exceptions to it, and this appears to be an exception, right? That's the.
Nashim. Nashim is calling it Nashim. It's females, but it's Nashim, male.
Not right.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Assistant Rabbi, thank you.
I got that from you.
Amarle, so Rabbi Yechanan asks Isi Barhini, Man Reish Sidra b'Bavel. Who's the head of the yeshiva in Bavel? Amarle Abba Richa. He calls him by his first name. He says Abba Richa.
Excuse me. In the footnote here, it says that the Rechelim were referring to multiples of females because the males are called Ayil. So it's got a different name altogether.
Right. But why is there a masculine suffix on a
As you,
feminine word?
as you said earlier, the Chumash says it one way, and
Right.
the Rabbanan say it another way.
Okay.
Slang.
This is funny that they say Rob has a nickname.
Well, actually, Rav, we had this once before, but Rav was this title. He wasn't supposed to be. His name was Abba, but Abba Aricha is Abba the Tall. So I'm like Abba Aricha Karislay. You call him Abba Aricha. Dakirna, I remember. Kadhavi Yasivna Acher Yud Zayin Shur Nachari the Rav Kamei the Rebbe. When I was younger, when I was in the yeshiva of Rebbe, I had to sit 17 rows behind Rav. And Benafkim Zakukim Dinar Mi Pumi the Rav Lepumi the Rebbe, Pumi the Rebbe Lepumi the Rav, and there was fire, sparks of fire that were going from the mouth of Rav to the mouth of Rebbe, and from the mouth of Rebbe to the mouth of Rav, which means they were there was a discussion, a dialogue between Rav and Rebbe, and I had to be 17 rows behind that. I didn't even know what they were discussing. Abba Aricha Karsle, and you call him Abba the Tall. Amrlei, he says to him, Amrlei Iyu, he says to him, Reish Zagez Bekama. How much wool do you need to give Reish Zagez? He changes the subject very quickly. Changes the subject. How much wool do you need to give to the Kohen? Amrlei Rabbi Yochanan. Amrlei, I have to probably take out Rabbi Yochanan. Amrlei B'shishim. Says you give.
160.
It's 1 out of 60. It says Vanan B'kol Shein Tanan. But we said that even if it's the smallest amount. So Amrlei Imkein Ma Bein Li V'lach. You're asking me a question. You're telling me what the Mishnah says. I'm explaining to you what the Mishnah means, and then requote to me the Mishnah. I'm explaining to you what's the difference between what I know and what you know. If you're asking me, I'm telling you the explanation for the Mishnah, and you're just telling it to me again. In other words, the words without the explanation. Kiyasser Rabdimi, when Rabdimi came to Bavel, Amar Reish Zagez, he said that Reish Zagez Rav Amar B'Shishim. Rav says that it's 1 in 60. Rabbi Yechanan Misham Rabbi Yanai Amar B'Sheish. Rabbi Yechanan, the name of Rabbi Yanai, says it's 1 out of 6.
So it's more more.
Does he mean it's 1 out of 6, or does it mean that you have to have 6 to give? What does it say?
It just says that the mitzvah applies to 60 selah. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Yanai that
Applies
the
to
mitzvah
6.
applies to 6 selah.
Okay, that means that you have 6. Okay. Yes. Amalei Abaya, Rabdimi. Abaya says to Rabdimi, Anchas Lanchada, you settled one matter, but Vakshas Lanchada, but you also made a question on something else. So, Bishleim de Rabbi Yechanan like kasha. On Rabbi Yechanan, we're not going to have a kasha. Why? So, we said that Rabbi Yechanan says that it's 60. Rabbi Yechanan told Isi Barhini that it's 1 out of 60. And we also had Rabbi Yechanan before that said that it's, if you have 6, then you give 5 to the kohen and you keep 1. So is it 60 or is it 6? So you've answered that. Why? Because when Rabdimi came, he said Rabbi Yechanan in the name of Rabbi Yanai. And the answer to that contradiction is Hadidei Hadirabe. Rabbi Yechanan himself has 60. And Rabbi Yechanan, in the name of Rabbi Yanai, says it's 6. That's how much selah you need to be obligated in the gifts of the wool. Ela Durava Durav Kasha, but we have a Kasha on Rav. Because you said Rav says 1 out of 60. Rav Bayas said that it's a mana and a half, which we said that's 37.5. So Dam Rav Manu Pras. Rav says that it's a mana and a half. The Gemara says Durava Durav Namile Kasha. It's not a Kasha on Rav. Why? Because my mana de Kamar ben Arboim Slaim. We're talking about a different size mana. This is very confusing. This would be like you say $1, and you didn't mean an American dollar, you meant a Canadian dollar. The opposite. You said $1, you meant. Here he says when he says a mana and a half, he's referring to a mana not of 25 selah, a mana that's 40 selah. The havalei b'shishim, because a mana and a half is in 60. So a mana and a half, a mana of 40 plus a half is another 20 is 60. That's exactly what Rav said, that it's 60. The Tani Tana Mana ben Arbaim Slime. Does a Tana ever talk about such a mana, which is 40 selah? Mana is always 25 coins. Where did we get this currency from? Gemara says, we do have a Mishnah. Vatanana was taught